Hello, we're back. And a little late, my apologies. I'm going to get started in about a minute and a half. It's very, very hot today, so my setup is a little unusual with some different sound dampening to prevent me from getting extremely warm because I had to turn off my AC. So if it sounds a little weird, that's why. Please bear with me. All right, we'll get started in a minute. All right, let's get down to business. Actually, nope, I lied. 10 more seconds. Okay, I think that's better. All right, let's do parts 4 and 5 of Deathworld by Harry Harrison. Oh, also, check out on the first video, I pinned the comment, but the artist of the cover commented, which I thought was pretty cool. His name is Bryn. Oh no, I can't remember his last name and I can't check right now. Well, it's there. Go check out his channel. I think he's got an Instagram account. Very cool. But anyway, Deathworld by Harry Harrison, part 4. Don't talk stupidly, Kirk said, as he punched for a duplicate order of steak. There are much simpler ways of committing suicide. Don't you realize that you're a millionaire now? With what you have in your pocket, you can relax the rest of your life on the pleasure planets. Pyrrus is a death world, not a sightseeing spot for jaded tourists. I cannot permit you to return with me. Gamblers who lose their tempers don't last long. Jason was angry now, yet it showed only in a negative way, in the lack of expression on his face and the calmness of his voice. Don't tell me what I can or cannot do, Kirk Pyrrus. You're a big man with a fast gun, but that doesn't make you my boss. All you can do is stop me from going back on your ship, but I can easily afford to get there another way. And don't try to tell me I want to go to Pyrrus for sightseeing when you have no idea of my real reasons. Jason didn't even try to explain his reasons. They were only half realized and too personal. The more he traveled, the more things looked the same to him. The old civilized planets sank into a drab similarity. Frontier worlds all had the crude sameness of temporary camps in a forest. Not that the galactic worlds bored him, it was just that he had found their limitations, yet had never found his own. Until he met Kirk, he had acknowledged no man his superior, or even his equal. This was more than egotism, it was facing facts. Now he was forced to face the fact that there was a whole world of people who might be superior to him. Jason could never rest content until he had been there and seen for himself, even if he died in the attempt. None of this could be told to Kirk. There were other reasons he would understand better. You're not thinking ahead when you prevent me from going to Pyrrus, Jason said. I'll not mention any moral debt you owe me for winning that money you needed, but what about the next time? If you needed that much lethal goods once, you'll probably need it again someday. Wouldn't it be better to have me on hand, old tried and true, than dreaming up some new and possibly unreliable scheme? Kirk chewed pensively on the second serving of steak. That makes sense, and I must admit I hadn't thought of it before. One failing we Pyrrans have is a lack of interest in the future. Staying alive day by day is enough trouble, so we tend to face emergencies as they arrive and let the dim future take care of itself. You can come. I hope you will still be alive when we need you. As Pyrran ambassador to a lot of places, I officially invite you to our planet, all expenses paid, on the condition you obey completely all our instructions regarding your personal safety. Conditions accepted, Jason said, and wondered why he was so cheerful about signing his own death warrant. Kirk was shoveling his way through his third dessert when his alarm watch gave a tiny hum. He dropped his fork instantly and stood up. "Time to go," he said. "We're on schedule now." While Jason scrambled to his feet, he jammed coins into the meter until the paid light came on. Then they were out the door and walking fast. Jason wasn't at all surprised when they came on a public escalator just behind the restaurant. He was beginning to realize that since leaving the casino, their every move had been carefully planned and timed. Without a doubt, the alarm was out and the entire planet being searched for them, yet so far they hadn't noticed the slightest sign of pursuit. This wasn't the first time Jason had to move just one jump ahead of the authorities, but it was the first time he had let someone else lead him by the hand while he did it. He had to smile at his own automatic agreement. He had been a loner for so many years that he found a certain inverse pleasure in following someone else. "Hurry up," Kirk growled after a quick glance at his watch. He set a steady, killing pace up the escalator steps. They went up 5 levels that way without seeing another person before Kirk relented and let the escalator do the work. Jason prided himself on keeping in condition, but the sudden climb after the sleepless night left him panting heavily and soaked with sweat. Kirk, cool of forehead and breathing normally, didn't show the slightest sign that he had been running. They were at the second motor level when Kirk stepped off the slowly rising steps and waved Jason after him. As they came through the exit to the street, a car pulled up to the curb in front of them. Jason had enough sense not to reach for his gun. At the exact moment they reached the car, the driver opened the door and stepped out. Kirk passed him a slip of paper without saying a word and slipped in behind the wheel. There was just enough time for Jason to jump in before the car pulled away. The entire transfer had taken less than 3 seconds. "That was the receipt from Ellis you gave him," Jason said. "Of course, that takes care of the ship and the cargo. They'll be off-planet and safely away before the casino's check is traced to Ellis. So now let's look after ourselves. I'll explain the plan in detail so there will be no slip-ups on your part. I'll go through the whole thing once, and if there are any questions, you'll ask them when I'm finished." The tones of command were so automatic that Jason found himself listening in quiet obedience, though one part of his mind wanted him to smile at the quick assumption of his incompetence. Kirk swung the car into the steady line of traffic heading out of the city to the spaceport. He drove easily while he talked. "There is a search on in the city, but we're well ahead of that. I'm sure the Cassilians don't want to advertise their bad sportsmanship, so there won't be anything as crude as a roadblock, but the port will be crawling with every agent they have. They know once the money gets off planet, it's gone forever. When we make a break for it, they will be sure we still have the goods, so there will be no trouble with the munition ship getting clear." Jason sounded a little shocked. "You mean you're setting us up as clay pigeons to cover the takeoff of the ship?" "You could put it that way, but since we have to get off planet anyway, there's no harm in using our escape as a smoke screen. Now shut up until I finish, like I told you. One more interruption and I dump you by the road." Jason was sure he would. He listened intently and quietly as Kirk repeated word for word what he had said before, then continued. "The official gate will probably be wide open with the traffic through it, and a lot of the agents will be in plainclothes. We might even get onto the field without being recognized, though I doubt it. It is of no importance. We will drive through the gate into the takeoff pad. The Pride of Darkon, for which we hold tickets, will be sounding its 2-minute siren and unhooking the gangway. By the time we get to our seats, the ship will take off." "That's all very fine," Jason said, "but what will the guards be doing all this time?" "Shooting at us, and at each other." Sorry, I lost my spot somehow. "We will take advantage of the confusion to get aboard." The answer did nothing to settle Jason's mind, but he let it slide for the moment. All right, say we do get aboard. Why don't they just prevent takeoff until we have been dragged out and stood against a wall? Kirk spared him a contemptuous glance before he returned his eyes to the road. I said the ship was the pride of Darkon. If you had studied the system at all, you would know what that means. Cassilia and Darkon are sister planets and rivals in every way. It has been less than 2 centuries since they fought an intra-system war that almost destroyed both of them. Now they exist in an armed-to-the-teeth neutrality that neither dares violate. The moment we set foot aboard the ship, we are on Darkon territory. There is no extradition agreement between the planets. Cassilia may want us, but not badly enough to start another war. That was all the explanation there was time for. Kirk swung the car out of the rush of traffic and onto a bridge marked Official Cars Only. Jason had a feeling of nakedness as they rolled under the harsh port lights toward the guarded gate ahead. It was closed. Another car approached the gate from the inside, and Kirk slowed their car to a crawl. One of the guards talked to the driver of the car inside the port, then waved to the gate attendant. The barrier gate began to swing inwards, and Kirk jammed down on the accelerator. Everything happened at once. The turbine howled, the spinning tires screeched on the road, and the car crashed open the gate. Jason had a vanishing glimpse of the open-mouthed guards, then they were skidding around the corner of a building. A few shots popped after them, but none came close. Driving with one hand, Kirk reached under the dash and pulled out a gun that was the twin of the monster strapped to his arm. "Use this instead of your own," he said. "Rocket-propelled explosive slugs. Makes a great bang. Don't bother shooting at anyone. I'll take care of that. Just stir up a little action and make them keep their distance. Like this." He fired a single snapshot at the side of the window and passed the gun to Jason almost before the slug hit. An empty truck blew up with a roar, raining pieces on the cars around and sending their drivers fleeing in panic. After that, it was a nightmare ride through a madhouse. Kirk drove with an apparent contempt for violent death. Other cars followed them and were lost in wheel-raising turns. They careened almost the full length of the field, leaving a trail of smoking chaos. Then the pursuit was all behind them, and the only thing ahead was the slim spire of the Pride of Darkon. The Pride was surrounded by a strong wire fence as suited the begrudged status of her planetary origin. The gate was closed and guarded by soldiers with leveled guns, waiting for a shot at the approaching car. Kirk made no attempt to come near them. Instead, he fed the last reserves of power to the car and headed for the fence. "Cover your face!" he shouted. Jason put his arms in front of his head just as they hit. Torn metal screamed, the fence buckled, wrapped itself around the car, but did not break. Jason flew off the seat and into the padded dash. By the time Kirk had the warped door open, he realized that the ride was over. Kirk must have seen the spin of his eyeballs because he didn't talk, just pulled Jason out and threw him onto the hood of the ruined car. "Climb over the buckled wire and make for the ship," he shouted. If there was any doubt what he meant, he set Jason an example of fine roadwork. It was inconceivable that someone of his bulk could run so fast, yet he did. He moved more like a charging tank than a man. Jason shook the fog from his head and worked up some speed for himself. Nevertheless, he was barely halfway to the ship when Kirk hit the gangway. It was already unhooked from the ship, but the shocked attendant stopped rolling it away as the big man bounded up the steps. At the top, he turned and fired at the soldiers who were charging through the open gate. They dropped, crawled, and returned his fire. Very few shot at Jason's running form. The scene in front of Jason cranked over in slow motion, Kirk standing at the top of the ramp, coolly returning the fire that splashed all about. He could have found safety in an instant through the open port behind him. The only reason he stayed there was to cover Jason. "Thanks!" Jason managed to gasp as he made the last few steps up the gangway, jumped the gap, and collapsed inside the ship. "You're perfectly welcome," Kirk said as he joined him, waving his gun to cool it off. A grim-jawed ship's officer stood back out of range of fire from the ground and looked them both up and down. "And just what is going on here?" he growled. Kirk tested the barrel with a wet thumb. then let the gun slide back into its holster. "We are law-abiding citizens of a different system who have committed no criminal acts. The savages of Cassilia are too barbarous for civilized company. Therefore, we are going to Darkon. Here are our tickets, in whose sovereign territory I believe we are at this moment." This last was added for the benefit of the Cassilian officer who had just stumbled to the top of the gangway and was raising his gun. The soldier couldn't be blamed. He saw these badly wanted criminals getting away, aboard a Darkon ship as well. Anger got the best of him, and he brought his gun up. "Come out of there, you scum! You're not escaping that easily. Come out slow with your hands up or I'll blast you!" It was a frozen moment of time that stretched and stretched without breaking. The pistol covered Kirk and Jason. Neither of them attempted to reach for their own guns. The gun twitched a bit as the ship's officer moved, then steadied back on the two men. The Darkon spaceman hadn't gone far, just a pace across the lock. This was enough to bring him next to a red box set flush with the wall. With a single swift gesture, he flipped up the cover and poised his thumb over the button inside. When he smiled, his lips peeled back to show all of his teeth. He had made up his mind, and it was the arrogance of the Cassilian officer that had been the deciding factor. "Fire a single shot into Darkon territory, and I press this button," he shouted. "And you know what this button does. Every one of your ships has them as well. Commit a hostile act against this ship, and someone will press a button. Every control rod will be blown out of the ship's pile at that instant, and half your filthy city will go up in the explosion." His smile was chiseled on his face, and there was no doubt that he would do what he said. "Go ahead, fire. I think I would enjoy pressing this." The takeoff siren was hooting now, the closed lock light blinking an angry message from the bridge. Like four actors in a grim drama, they faced each other an instant more. Then the Cassilian officer, growling with unvoicable, frustrated anger, turned and leaped back to the steps. "All passengers board ship. 45 seconds to take off. Clear the port." The ship's officer slammed shut the cover of the box and locked it as he talked. There was barely time to make the acceleration couches before the Pride of Darkon cleared ground. Got a page break here, and I could use one myself. Let's take a short minute break. Okay, man, allergies are killing me right now. All right, chapter 5. Once the ship was in orbit, the captain sent for Jason and Kirk. Kirk took the floor and was completely frank about the previous night's activities. The only fact of importance he left out was Jason's background as a professional gambler. He drew a beautiful picture of two lucky strangers whom the evil forces of Cassilia wanted to deprive of their gambling efforts. All this fitted perfectly the captain's preconceptions of Cassilia. In the end, he congratulated his officer on the correctness of his actions and began the preparation of a long report to his government. He gave the two men his best wishes as well as the liberty of the ship. It was a short trip. Jason barely had time to catch up on his sleep before they grounded on Darkon. Being without luggage, they were the first ones through customs. They left the shed just in time to see another ship landing in a distant pit. Kirk stopped to watch it, and Jason followed his gaze. It was a gray, scarred ship, with the stubby lines of a freighter, but sporting as many guns as a cruiser. "Yours, of course?" Jason said. Kirk nodded and started toward the ship. One of the locks opened as they came up, but no one appeared. Instead, a remote release folding ladder rattled down to the ground. Kirk swarmed up it, and Jason followed glumly. Somehow, he felt, this was overdoing the no-frills and nonsense attitude. Jason was catching on to Pyrrhus ways, though. The reception aboard ship for the ambassador was just what he expected. Nothing. Kirk closed the lock himself, and they found couches as the takeoff horn sounded. The main jets roared, and acceleration smashed down on Jason. It didn't stop. Instead, it grew stronger, squeezing the air out of his lungs and the sight from his eyes. He screamed, but couldn't hear his own voice through the roaring in his ears. Mercifully, he blacked out. When consciousness returned, the ship was at zero G. Jason kept his eyes closed and let the pain seep out of his body. Kirk spoke suddenly. He was standing next to the couch. My fault, Meta. I should have told you we had a 1G passenger aboard. You might have eased up a bit on your usual bone-breaking takeoff. It doesn't seem to have harmed him much. What was he doing here? Jason felt mild surprise that the second voice was a girl's, but he wasn't interested enough to go to the trouble of opening his sore eyes. Going to Pyrrus. I tried to talk him out of it, of course, but I couldn't change his mind. It's a shame, too. I would like to have done more for him. He's the one who got the money for us. Oh, that's awful, the girl said. Jason wondered why it was awful. It didn't make sense to his groggy mind. It would have been much better if he stayed on Darkon, the girl continued. He's very nice looking. I think it's a shame he has to die. That was too much for Jason. He pried one eye open, then the other. The voice belonged to a girl about 21 who was standing next to the bed, gazing down at Jason. She was beautiful. Jason's eyes opened wider as he realized she was very beautiful, with the kind of beauty never found in the civilized galaxy. The women he had known all ran to pale skin, hollow shoulders, gray faces covered with tints and dyes. They were the products of centuries of breeding weaknesses back into the race as the advance of medicine kept alive more and more non-survival types. This girl was the direct opposite in every way. She was the product of survival on Pyrrus. The heavy gravity that produced bulging muscles in men brought out firm strength in strap-like female muscles. She had the figure of a goddess, tanned skin, and perfectly formed face. Her hair, which was cut short, circled her head like a golden crown. The only unfeminine thing about her was the gun she wore in a bulky forearm holster. When she saw Jason's eyes open, she smiled at him. Her teeth were as even and as white as he had expected. I'm Meta, the pilot of this ship, and you must be Jason dinAlt. That was a lousy takeoff, Meta. I'm really very sorry, she laughed. But being born on a 2G planet does make one a little immune to acceleration. I save fuel too, with the synergy curve. Kirk gave a non-committal grunt. Come along, Meta. We'll take a look at the cargo. Some of the new stuff will plug the gaps in the perimeter. Oh yes, she said, almost clapping her hands with happiness. I read the specs. They're simply wonderful. Like a schoolgirl with a new dress, or a box of candy. That's a great attitude to have towards bombs and flamethrowers. Jason smiled wryly at the thought as he groaned off the couch. The two Pyrrhus had gone, and he pulled himself painfully through the door after them. It took him a long time to find his way to the hold. The ship was big and apparently empty of crew. Jason finally found a man sleeping in one of the brightly lit cabins. He recognized him as the driver who had turned the car over to them on a Cassilia. The man, who had been sleeping soundly a moment before, opened his eyes as soon as Jason drifted into the room. He was wide awake. How do I get to the cargo hold? Jason asked. The other told him, closed his eyes, and went instantly back to sleep before Jason could even say thanks. In the hold, Kirk and Meta had opened some of the crates and were chortling with joy over their lethal contents. Meta, a pressure canister in her arms, turned to Jason as he came through the door. Just look at this, she said. The powder in here. Why, you can eat it like dirt with less harm. Yet it is instantly deadly to all forms of vegetable life. She stopped suddenly as she realized Jason didn't share her extreme pleasure. I'm sorry. I forgot for a moment that you weren't a Pyrran. So you don't really understand, do you? Before he could answer, the PA speaker called her name. Jump time, she said. Come with me to the bridge while I do the equations. We can talk there. I know so little about any place except Pyrrus that I have a million questions to ask. Jason followed her to the bridge, where she relieved the duty officer and began taking readings for the jump setting. She looked out of place among the machines, a sturdy but supple figure in a simple one-piece ship suit. Yet there was no question of... Oh, I'm so sorry, I keep losing my spot. Yet there was no denying the efficiency with which she went about her job. Meta, aren't you a little young to be the pilot of an interstellar ship? Am I? She thought for a second. I really don't know how old pilots are supposed to be. I have been piloting for about 3 years now, and I'm almost 20. Is that younger than usual? Jason opened his mouth, then laughed. I suppose that all depends on what planet you're from. Some places you would have trouble getting licensed. But I'll bet things are different on Pyrrus. By their standards, you must rank as an old lady. Now you're making a joke, Meta said serenely as she fed a figure into the calculator. I've seen old ladies on some planets. They are wrinkled and have gray hair. I don't know how old they are. I asked one, but she wouldn't tell me her age. But I'm sure they must be older than anyone on Pyrrus. No one looks like that there. I don't mean old that way. Jason groped for the right word. Not old, but grown up. A mature adult. Everyone is grown up, she answered. At least as soon as they leave the wards. And they do that when they're 6. My first child is grown up, and the second one would be too. Only he's dead. So I surely must be. That seemed to settle the question for her, though Jason's thoughts jumped with the alien concepts and the background inherent behind her words. Meta punched in the last setting, and the course tape began to chunk out of the case. She turned her attention back to Jason. I'm glad you're aboard this trip, though I'm sorry you're going to Pyrrus. But we'll have lots of time to talk. There are so many things I want to find out about other planets, and why people go around acting the way they do. Not at all like home, where you know why people are doing things all the time. She frowned over the tape for a moment, then turned her attention back to Jason. What is your home planet like? One after another, the usual lies he told people came to his lips and were pushed away. Why bother lying to a girl who really didn't care if you were serf or noble? To her, there were only 2 kinds of people in the galaxy, Pyrrans and the rest. For the first time since he had fled from Porgorostad, he found himself telling someone the truth of his origin. My home planet, just about the stuffiest, dullest dead end in the universe. You can't believe the destructive decay of a planet that is mainly agrarian, caste-conscious, and completely satisfied with its own boring existence. Not only is there no change, but no one wants change. My father was a farmer, so I should have been a farmer too, if I had listened to the advice from my betters. It was unthinkable, as well as forbidden for me to do anything else, and everything I wanted to do was against the law. I was 15 before I learned to read out of a book stolen from a noble school. After that, there was no turning back. By the time I stowed aboard an off-world freighter at 19, I must have broken every law on the planet. Happily. Leaving home for me was just like getting out of prison. Meta shook her head at the thought. I just can't imagine a place like that. I'm sure I wouldn't like it there. I'm sure you wouldn't, Jason laughed. So once I was in space, with no law-abiding talents or skills, I just wandered into one thing and another. In this age of technology, I was completely out of place. Oh, I suppose I could have done well in some army, but I'm not so good at taking orders. Whenever I gambled, I did well, so little by little, I just drifted into it. People are the same everywhere, so I managed to make out well, wherever I end up. I know what you mean about people being alike, but they are also so different, she said. I'm not being clear at all, am I? What I mean is that at home I know what people will do and why they do it at the same time. People on all the other planets do act alike, as you said, yet I have very much trouble understanding why. For instance, I like to try the local food when we set down on a planet, and if there is time, I always do. There are bars and restaurants near every spaceport, so I go there, and I always have trouble with the men. They want to buy me drinks, hold my hand. Well, a single girl in those port joints has to expect a certain amount of interest from the men. Oh, I know that, she said. What I don't understand is why they don't listen when I tell them I'm not interested and to go away. They just laugh and pull up a chair, usually. But I have found that one thing works wherever I am. I tell them if they don't stop bothering me, I'll break their arm. Does that stop them? Jason asked. No, of course not. But after I break their arm, they go away. And the others don't bother me either. It's a lot of fuss to go through, and the food is usually awful. Jason didn't laugh, particularly when he realized that this girl could break the arm of any spaceport thug in the galaxy. She was a strange mixture of naivety and strength, unlike anyone he had ever met before. Once again, he realized that he had to visit the planet that produced people like her and Kirk. Tell me about Pyrrus, he asked. Why is it that you and Kirk assume automatically that I will drop dead as soon as I land? What is the planet like? All the warmth was gone from her face now. I can't tell you. You'll have to see it for yourself. I know that much after visiting some of the other worlds. Pyrrus is like nothing you galaxy people have ever experienced. You won't really believe it until it is too late. Will you promise me something? No, he answered. At least not until after I hear what it is and decide. Don't leave the ship when we land. You should be safe enough aboard, and I'll be flying a cargo out within a few weeks. I'll promise nothing of the sort. I'll leave when I want to leave. Jason knew there was logic in her words, but his back was up at her automatic superiority. Meta finished the jump settings without another word. There was a tension in the room that prevented them both from talking. It was the next ship day before he saw her again. Then it was completely by accident. She was in the astrogation dome when he entered, looking up at the sparkling immensity of the jump sky. For the first time, he saw her off-duty, wearing something other than a ship suit. This was a loose, soft robe that accentuated her beauty. She smiled at him. The stars are so wonderful, she said. Come look. Jason came close to her, and with an unthinking, almost automatic movement, put his arm around her. Neither did she resent it, for she covered his hand with hers. Then they kissed, and it was just the way he knew it would be. I can read one more section. Just give me another short break here. Okay. Let's read part 6. After that, they were together constantly. When Meta was on duty, he brought her meals to the bridge and they talked. Jason learned a little more about her world, but since by unspoken agreement they didn't discuss much more of it, he didn't learn much. He talked of the many planets he had visited and the people he had known. She was an appreciative listener, and the time went quickly by. They enjoyed each other's company, and it was a wonderful trip. Then it ended. There were 14 people aboard the ship, yet Jason had never seen more than 2 or 3 at a time. There was a fixed rotation of duties that they followed in the ship's operation. When not on duty, the Pyrrans minded their own business in an intense and self-sufficient manner. Only when the ship came out of jump and the PA barked, "Assembly!" did they all get together. Kirk was giving orders for the landing, and questions were snapped back and forth. It was all technical, and Jason didn't bother following it. It was the attitude of the Pyrrans that drew his attention. Their talk tended to be faster now, as were their motions. They were like soldiers preparing for battle. Their sameness struck Jason for the first time. Not that they looked alike or did the same things. It was the way they moved and reacted that caused the striking similarity. They were like great stalking cats, walking fast, tense, and ready to spring at all times, their eyes never still for an instant. Jason tried to talk to Meta after the meeting, but she was almost a stranger. She answered in monosyllables, and her eyes never met his, just brushed over them and went on. There was nothing he could really say, so she moved to leave. He started to put his hand out to stop her, then thought better of it. There would be other times to talk. Kirk was the only one who took any notice of him, and then only to order him to an acceleration couch. Meta's landings were infinitely worse than her takeoffs, at least when she landed on Pyrrus. There were sudden acceleration surges in every direction. At one point, there was a free fall that seemed endless. There were loud thuds against the hull that shook the framework of the ship. It was more like a battle than a landing, and Jason wondered how much truth there was in that. When the ship finally landed, Jason didn't even know it. The constant 2 Gs felt like deceleration. Only the descending moan of the ship's engines convinced him they were down. Unbuckling the straps and sitting up was an effort. 2 Gs don't seem that bad, at first. Walking required the same exertion as would carrying a man of his own weight on his shoulders. When Jason lifted his arm to unlatch the door, it was as heavy as 2 arms. He shuffled slowly toward the main lock. They were all there ahead of him, 2 of the men rolling transparent cylinders from a nearby room. From their obvious weight and the way they clanged when they bumped, Jason knew they were made of transparent metal. He couldn't conceive of any possible use for them. Empty cylinders, a meter in diameter, longer than a man, one end solid, the other hinged and sealed. It wasn't until Kirk spun the sealing wheel and opened one of them that their use became apparent. "Get in," Kirk said. "When you're locked inside, you'll be carried out of the ship." "Thank you, no," Jason told him. "I have no particular desire to make a spectacular landing on your planet sealed up like a packaged sausage." "Don't be a fool," was Kirk's snapped answer. "We're all going out in these tubes. We've been away too long to risk the surface without reorientation." Jason did feel a little foolish as he saw the others getting into tubes. He picked the nearest one, slid into it feet first, and pulled the lid closed. When he tightened the wheel in the center, it squeezed down against a flexible seal. Within a minute, the CO2 content in the closed cylinder went up, and an air regenerator at the bottom hummed into life. Kirk was the last one in. He checked the seals on all the other tubes first, then jabbed the airlock override release. As it started cycling, he quickly sealed himself in the remaining cylinder. Both inner and outer locks ground slowly open, and dim light filtered in through the sheets of falling rain. For Jason, the whole thing seemed an anticlimax. All this preparation for absolutely nothing. Long, impatient minutes passed before a lift truck appeared, driven by a Pyrran. He loaded the cylinders onto the truck like so much dead cargo. Jason had the misfortune to be buried at the bottom of the pile, so he could see absolutely nothing when they drove outside. It wasn't until the man carrying cylinders had been dumped in a metal-walled room that Jason saw his first native Pyrran life. The lift truck driver was swinging a thick outer door shut when something flew in through the entrance and struck against the far wall. Jason's eye was caught by the motion. He looked to see what it was when it dropped straight down towards his face. Forgetful of the metal cylinder wall, he flinched away. The creature struck the transparent metal and clung to it. Jason had the perfect opportunity to examine it in every detail. It was almost too horrible to be believable, as though it were a bearer of death stripped to the very essentials. A mouth that split the head in 2, rows of teeth serrated and pointed, leathery, claw-tipped wings, longer claws on the limbs that tore at the metal wall. Terror rose up in Jason as he saw that the claws were tearing gouges in the transparent metal. Wherever the creature's saliva touched, the metal clouded and chipped under the assault of the teeth. Logic said these were just scratches on the thick tube. They couldn't matter, but blind, unreasoning fear sent Jason curling away as far as he could, shrinking inside himself, seeking escape. Only when the flying creature began dissolving did he realize the nature of the room outside. Sprays of steaming liquid came from all sides, raining down until the cylinders were covered. After one last clash of its jaws, the Pyrran animal was washed off and carried away. The liquid drained away through the floor, and a second and third shower followed. While the solutions were being pumped away, Jason fought to bring his emotions into line. He was surprised at himself. No matter how frightful the creature had been, he couldn't understand the fear it could generate through the wall of the sealed tube. His reaction was all out of proportion to the cause. Even with the creature destroyed and washed out of sight, it took all of his willpower to steady his nerves and bring his breathing back to normal. Meta walked by outside, and he realized that the sterilization process was finished. He opened his own tube and climbed wearily out. Meta and the others had gone by this time, and only a hawk-faced stranger remained, waiting for him. "I'm Bruco, in charge of the adaptation clinic. Kirk told me who you were. I'm sorry you're here. Now come along, I want some blood samples." "Now I feel right at home," Jason said. "The old Pyrrhus hospitality." Bruco only grunted and stamped out. Jason followed him down a bare corridor into a sterile lab. The double gravity was tiring, a constant drag on sore muscles. While Bruco ran tests on the blood sample, Jason rested. He had almost dozed off into a painful sleep when Bruco returned with a tray of bottles and hypodermic needles. "Amazing," he announced. "Not an antibody in your serum that would be of any use on this planet. I have a batch of antigens here that will make you sick as a beast for at least a day. Take off your shirt." "Have you done this often?" Jason asked. "I mean, juice up an outlander so he can enjoy the pleasures of your world?" Bruco jammed in a needle that felt like it grated on the bone. "Not often at all. Last time was years ago, a half-dozen researchers from some institute willing to pay well for the chance to study the local life forms. We didn't say no. Always need more galaxy currency." Jason was already beginning to feel lightheaded from the shots. "How many of them lived?" he mumbled vaguely. "One. We got him off in time. Made them pay in advance, of course." At first, Jason thought the Pyrrhus was joking. Then he remembered they had very little interest in humor of any kind. If one half of what Meta and Kirk had told him was true, 6-to-1 odds weren't bad at all. There was a bed in the next room, and Bruco helped him to it. Jason felt drugged, and probably was. He fell into a deep sleep and into the dream. Fear and hatred mixed in equal parts and washed over him red hot. If this was a dream, he never wanted to sleep again. If it wasn't a dream, he wanted to die. He tried to fight up against it, but only sank in more deeply. There was no beginning and no end to the fear, and no way to escape. When consciousness returned, Jason could remember no detail of the nightmare, just the fear remained. He was soaked with sweat and ached in every muscle. It must have been the massive dose of shots, he finally decided. That and the brutal gravity. That didn't take the taste of fear out of his mouth, though. Bruco stuck his head in the door, then looked Jason up and down. "Thought you were dead," he said. "Slept the clock around. Don't move. I'll get something to pick you up." The pickup was in the form of another needle and a glass full of evil-looking fluid. It settled his thirst, but made him painfully aware of gnawing hunger. "Want to eat?" Bruco asked. "I'll bet you do. I've speeded up your metabolism so you'll build muscle faster. Only way you'll ever beat the gravity. Gives you quite an appetite for a while, though." Bruco ate at the same time, and Jason had a chance to ask some questions. "When I do get a chance to look around your fascinating planet, when will that be? So far this trip has been about as interesting as a jail term." "Relax and enjoy your food. Probably be months before you're able to go outside, if at all." Jason felt his jaw hanging and closed it with a snap. "Could you possibly tell me why?" "Of course. You'll have to go through the same training course that our children take. It takes them 6 years. Of course, it's their first 6 years of life, so you might think that you, as an adult, could learn faster. Then again, they have the advantage of heredity. All I can say is you'll go outside these sealed buildings when you're ready." Bruco had finished eating while he talked, and sat staring at Jason's bare arms with growing disgust. Ugh, the first thing we want to get you is a gun, he said. It gives me a sick feeling to see someone without one. Of course, Bruco wore his own gun continually, even within the sealed buildings. Every gun is fitted to its owner and would be useless on anyone else, Bruco said. I'll show you why. He led Jason into an armory jammed with deadly weapons. Put your arm in this while I make the adjustments. It was a box-like machine with a pistol grip on the side. Jason clutched the grip and rested his elbow on a metal loop. Bruco fixed pointers that touched his arm, then copied the results from the meters. Reading the figures from his list, he selected various components from bins and quickly assembled a power holster and gun. With the holster strapped to his forearm and the gun in his hand, Jason noticed for the first time they were connected by a flexible cable. The gun fitted his hand perfectly. This is the secret of the power holster, Bruco said, tapping the flexible cable. It is perfectly loose while you are using the weapon, but when you want it returned to the holster, Bruco made an adjustment, and the cable became a stiff rod that whipped the gun from Jason's hand and suspended it in midair. Then the return. The rod cable whirred and snapped the gun back into the holster. The drawing action is the opposite of this, of course. A great gadget, Jason said. But how do I draw? Do I whistle or something for the gun to pop out? No, it is not a sonic control, Bruco answered with a sober face. It is much more precise than that. Here, take your left hand and grasp an imaginary gun butt. Tense your trigger finger. Do you notice the pattern of the tendons in the wrist? Sensitive actuators touch the tendons in your right wrist. They ignore all patterns except the one that says, hand ready to receive gun. After a time, the mechanism becomes completely automatic. When you want the gun, it is in your hand. When you don't, it is in the holster. Jason made grasping motions with his right hand, crooking his index finger. There was a sudden smashing pain against his hand and a loud roar. The gun was in his hand. Half the fingers were numb, and smoke curled up from the barrel. Of course, there are only blank charges in the gun until you learn control. Guns are always loaded. There is no safety. Notice the lack of a trigger guard? That enables you to bend your finger a slight bit more when drawing, so the gun will fire the instant it touches your hand. It was, without a doubt, the most murderous weapon Jason had ever handled, as well as being the hardest to manage. Working against the muscle-burning ache of high gravity, he fought to control the devilish device. It had an infuriating way of vanishing into the holster just as he was about to pull the trigger. Even worse was the tendency to leap out before he was quite ready. The gun went to the position where his hand should be. If the fingers weren't correctly placed, they were crashed aside. Jason only stopped the practice when his entire hand was one livid bruise. Complete mastery would come with time, but he could always understand why the Pyrrans never removed their guns. Could already understand. It would be like removing a part of your own body. The movement of gun from holster to hand was too fast for him to detect. It was certainly faster than the neural current that shaped the hand into the gun-holding position. For all apparent purposes, it was like having a lightning bolt in your fingertip. Point the finger, and blam! There's the explosion. Bruco had left Jason to practice alone. When his aching hand could take no more, he stopped and headed back toward his own quarters. Turning a corner, he had a quick glimpse of a familiar figure going away from him. Meta! Wait for a second, I want to talk to you. She turned impatiently as he shuffled up, going as fast as he could in the doubled gravity. Everything about her seemed different from the girl he had known on the ship. Heavy boots came as high as her knees, her figure was lost in bulky coveralls of some metallic fabric, the trim waist was bulged out by a belt of canisters. Her very expression was coldly distant. I've missed you, he said. I hadn't realized you were in this building. He reached for her hand, but she moved it out of his reach. What is it you want? She asked. What is it I want? He echoed, with barely concealed anger. This is Jason, remember me? We're friends. It is allowed for friends to talk without wanting anything. What happened on the ship has nothing to do with what happens on Pyrrus. She started forward, impatiently, as she talked. I have finished my reconditioning and must return to work. You'll be staying here in the sealed buildings, so I won't be seeing you. Why don't you say with the rest of the children? That's what your tone implies. And don't try walking out. There are some things we have to settle first. Jason made the mistake of putting out his hand to stop her. He didn't really know what happened next. One instant he was standing. The next he was sprawled suddenly on the floor. His shoulder was badly bruised, and Meta had vanished down the corridor. Limping back to his own room, he cursed women in general, and Meta in particular. Dropping onto his rock-hard bed, he tried to remember the reasons that had brought him here in the first place, and weighed them against the perpetual torture of the gravity, the fear-filled dreams it inspired, the automatic contempt of these people for any outsider. He quickly checked the growing tendency to feel sorry for himself. By Pyrran standards, he was soft and helpless. If he wanted them to think any better of him, he would have to change a good deal. He sank into a fatigue-drugged sleep, then that was broken only by the screaming fear of his dreams. Alright, I think we'll stop there for now. Ugh, a lot of mess-ups today. I'm so sorry. It's between like the heat, the allergies making it hard to concentrate, and reading off of a screen instead of a book. I don't know why, but reading off of a monitor is so much harder for me than a book. It's so much easier for me to lose my place. Even an e-reader. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, thanks for hanging out, and thank you, as always, I can't even talk right without reading, to Aindulmedir for letting me use his tunes. We listened to the Lunar Lexicon today, and you can find him on Bandcamp, YouTube, or Spotify. So, yeah, go show him some love. And as always, thanks for hanging out. Feel free to shoot me an email if you got any comments, questions, whatever. It's the same username as my YouTube at gmail.com. And I will see you folks again later this week, I suspect. Take it easy.